Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host Jeffrey Lazarus, and you are watching the weekly news update for the week of June 14th on the Gaming Vector. This week we're going to do something a little bit different. First off, the game that you're going to be seeing in the background is Dark Souls. It's what I've been playing recently, so that's the footage we're going to have to show, because I don't want to possibly run into copyright issues by showing footage from trailers of the various games that were talked about at E3. That having been said, we're going to go very briefly over Electronic Arts and Ubisoft and what they showed at their press conferences, and then we're going to dig a little deeper into the Microsoft and Sony conferences, and really I'm just going to kind of stick to the stuff that interests me the most, and that's simply because if I didn't, then this would be an hour-long video going over every single game that was talked about. So first off, let's jump into what EA showed off. The first thing they showed was Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. Now, that looked rather interesting because it looked like they took the idea of Plants vs. Zombies, that whole art style and all of that type of stuff, and they put it into a third-person shooter. And what I'm thinking is it's probably going to be something like Sanctum, or Sanctum 2, which just recently came out on Xbox Live Arcade, where it's kind of a co-op tower defense game, but it's played from a third-person perspective. In the case of Sanctum, it's a first-person perspective, and you have to physically go out and shoot the enemies by yourself, and it's kind of a wave-based thing. It's, you know, basically horde mode the game, except you have a tower to protect. The other things they showed that really interested me: they showed a brief teaser trailer for Battlefront, the new Star Wars Battlefront, and I am a huge fan of Battlefront 1 and 2. It's being made by DICE, the same guys who make Battlefield, which is essentially what Battlefront was. It was Battlefield reskinned with Star Wars. I'm super excited for it, and I shouldn't be, because all we've seen is basically a snowspeeder and part of a walker, and most likely, almost definitely, that was all CG. Might have been done in-engine, but it was, even if it was pre-rendered. But still, super excited. I've been waiting for a new Battlefront for years and years, so very happy to see that. They showed off a new Need for Speed game, racing game, not really that interested. They showed off Dragon Age Inquisition, which all they showed for that was a pre-rendered / CG trailer. Got to see a couple of characters. Looked like possibly the Seeker from the second game, as well as Varric from the second game, and Morrigan from the first game. Dragon Age is one of those franchises. A lot of people really love the first game. A lot of people really didn't like the second one. And while I agree the second one had like overused environments and so on and so forth, I liked the story of that one better than the story of the first one, because the story of the first one is basically, you know, the world's in peril, you're going to save the world, you're the big hero. Whereas the second one didn't have that. And it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of marry those things together and make a really fun, interesting game out of Dragon Age Inquisition. I hope they can, because I'm a fan of the franchise, and I want to see this one do really, really well. So other than that, they showed some sports titles: NBA, Madden, FIFA, UFC. They also showed Battlefield 4 multiplayer, which was 64-player multiplayer, which is what we've had on the PC for years, but on the console versions it's been 32. I believe it's been confirmed that on the PS4 and the Xbox One we will have 64-player multiplayer, so that is fantastic. And the map looked huge, and they were doing things like having entire skyscrapers crumble in the middle of the map. Like, the entire building came down, and if they can do that with 64 players, with me sitting on my couch playing, and not have horrendous lag, I'm in. They also showed a new Mirror's Edge title. It appears to be a prequel, it may be a reboot, we don't really know. But what we do know is Faith is back, the Mirror's Edge franchise is back, and I am happy to see it, because I've been a huge fan of Mirror's Edge since the first one came out. And I want more of that world and more of that franchise, and mainly, I want more of that gameplay, because the gameplay was what really sold me on that. It was really super interesting. So, moving on from that, we're going to talk real quickly about Ubisoft's press conference. Now, they showed off Splinter Cell Blacklist, but we couldn't really see a whole lot of the gameplay in there, and the last time we saw gameplay, it looked like it was a lot quicker and more action-oriented than previous Splinter Cell titles. It's disappointing to some, exciting for newcomers to the franchise. I get it, I understand. But they did announce that Spies vs. Mercs multiplayer will be back, so we'll have to see how that works out, but Spies vs. Mercs was a wildly popular multiplayer mode in previous installments, and it's good to see it come back. They also showed off Rayman Legends, which looks like a Rayman game. It's a platformer, looks like it has co-op, about 120 levels, I believe is what they said. So, if you're into those kind of games, that should be a lot of fun for you and well worth taking a look at. Me personally, not that interested. They also showed off a new game called The Mighty Quest for Epic Loot. Now, this one looks very, very interesting to me because it looks like it's one part dungeon crawler, one part dungeon keeper. And what I mean by that is it looks like you get to kind of build your own castle or dungeon, and hopefully you'll be able to like set up your room designs and set up your maze and whatnot, and then at the end is your treasure. And then other players can come into your castle or your dungeon and try and fight their way through the traps and monsters you set up to get your treasure and take it with them. And alternatively, you can go and do the same to other players, go into their dungeon and play around dungeon crawler style and try and take out monsters and so on and so forth. If that's how it works, that is something I have wanted for a very, very long time. It looks really cool. Hopefully it is. They also showed us, I'm just going to run through some of these real quick. They showed us a new trailer for South Park Stick of Truth. Still in development, that's good to hear. We still don't know a whole lot about the game. They showed a trailer for Just Dance 2014. I don't play dancing games, I don't really care. They showed Rabbids Invasion, which looks like it's an Xbox One Kinect-enabled TV show cartoon thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. They also showed a trailer for Assassin's Creed 4. Looks like Assassin's Creed. If you're a fan of the franchise, then you've probably already pre-ordered the game. If you're not a fan of the franchise, then this isn't going to do anything to convince you. They also showed off a new game titled The Crew, which looks to be an open-world racing game. Now, I say I'm not a huge fan of racing games, but this one actually looks pretty cool because it looks like it's open-world, multiple cities. They showed the entire U.S. I don't know how true that is. If they managed to cram all of that into one game, I would be very, very impressed. But what it looks like is it's kind of a racing MMO where you can team up with other players and build crews and go against rival crews and so on and so forth. We'll see how that plays out. Looked super interesting. Gameplay looked a little bit wonky, but that could just be because it's not that far along in development. We don't really know much about it. Also, they showed Trials Fusion and Trials Frontier. These are new games in the Trials HD and Evolution franchise. Trials Fusion is going to be the new console title, and I believe it's coming to the PlayStation 4, as well as the previous consoles that it's been on before, such as the Xbox. I believe it's also coming to PC as well. So, Trials Frontier, it looks like Trials, but they added in kind of a stunt system, so you can do different tricks and whatnot while you're on your bike. That looks pretty cool. Trials Frontier is a mobile Trials game. I'm assuming it's meant to be played on phones, tablets, that sort of thing. I'm not sure how Trials is going to work with touchscreen controls, but I guess we'll find out when it comes out. And the final thing that they showed was The Division, which looked like an MMO third-person shooter. If you've played the game Defiance, it kind of looked like that to a certain degree, in so much that it's an MMO third-person shooter, but it looks like you can kind of team up, build a squad of 3 or 4 people, go around and do missions, and encounter other squads that are from rival factions and have PvP battles in the street and so on and so forth. Looked really cool. It wasn't quite the show stealer that Watch Dogs was last year, but it still looked pretty interesting. So, beyond that, we have the Sony and Microsoft press events. So, I'm just going to try and run through these really quickly in the interest of time. So, the Microsoft press event, they started out, showed MGS5, Metal Gear Solid 5, that is. Looks really interesting. Graphically, it was pretty good looking. It's not a console exclusive. It's going to be on PlayStation as well. They showed some 360 games. They showed World of Tanks, which has been a PC exclusive for the longest time. It's a free-to-play tank battle game, 15 versus 15 multiplayer. Can't really argue with that. They showed a new, I believe, independent title, Max Curse of the Brotherhood. Looked like a Kinect-enabled platformer. Not really that interested in it, but I can see the draw. They also showed gameplay for Dark Souls 2. And as you can see, I've been playing Dark Souls in the video. I'm a huge fan of the Souls franchise, the Souls games. Dark Souls 2 looks like Dark Souls, but better. So I'm on board for that day one. It comes out in March. Now we get into the Xbox One games. So what they showed off specifically for Xbox One. Rise, Son of Rome, which looked like it was going to be this really cool Roman spectacle fighter, like very kind of grounded in reality. And then it became QTE the game, from what I could see. So I'll check it out, assuming I purchase an Xbox One. I'll check out Rise, Son of Rome, but with all the QuickTime events, I don't expect it to be that good, honestly. They showed a new Killer Instinct title, which I was super excited for until I found out that A, it's not being developed by Rare, and B, from what I understand, it's a free-to-play title where you have one character starting out and you have to buy the other characters if you want to play as them. That is dumb. That is really dumb. They also showed Sunset Overdrive, which is a new game from Insomniac. These are the guys who made Ratchet & Clank. They made Fuse, which came out earlier this year and was kind of a middling game. It is an Xbox One exclusive. They are hopefully going to be able to make it better than Fuse was, because the Ratchet & Clank games have all been pretty good and they were all PlayStation exclusives. So maybe trying to develop for multiple platforms is what kind of hamstrung Fuse and made it very kind of just bog standard shooting. We'll see how that works out. But it looks really interesting, looks really colorful. I highly suggest checking out the trailer. They showed Forza Motorsport 5, racing game, don't care. They showed Minecraft on the Xbox One, Bigger World, so on and so forth. If it's on par with the PC version that people have been playing for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now, then that's great. If it's not on par with the PC version, with the Xbox 360 version still isn't on par with, then why would you not continue to play not the 360, but the PC version of the game? That's where it is best, that's where it's always been best, and if the Xbox One doesn't come out and just match up with it day one, then why would you bother? So let's see what else they showed. They showed Quantum Break. Still don't know anything about it, but it's being made by Remedy. Remedy makes good games, so I'm interested. I'll check it out. They showed D4, which is, I believe, the fourth in the D franchise that has spanned multiple years in several different systems. It's got a very big cult following. I'm not part of that cult, but if you are interested, they did show it off. It is going to be on Xbox One. They also showed a few other games. They showed Crimson Dragon, which at the time didn't have any sound, but it is made by the guy who made Panzer Dragoon. It looks very Panzer Dragoon, but from what I read, it may well be a Kinect title, which kind of kills it for me. Can't really get excited about Kinect titles because I don't want to play with a Kinect. I would rather have a controller in my hands. They also showed Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which will also be on PC. The Witcher franchise, a long-standing, very, very good RPG franchise, started out on PC, then they made the jump PC and Xbox 360. Now they're going to Xbox One and PC. Witcher franchise, fantastic. Game looks great. Can't wait for it. They showed some Battlefield 4 single player. I'm more of a multiplayer Battlefield guy. Don't really care about the single player. You sold me with the multiplayer. They showed off a few other new titles. They showed off a game called Below, which is supposedly an adventure game with roguelike elements. Now, we don't know a whole lot about it. We couldn't tell a whole lot about it from the trailer, but if it's got roguelike elements and it's good, I am on board. I will give that a shot. They also showed a trailer for the next Halo game, which in the trailer was simply titled Halo, but there were obvious references in the trailer that show that it takes place after Halo 4. So this, I would assume, has to be Halo 5. Why they didn't come out and say that, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe it's a side story, who knows. Now, the two other games that they showed that were really, really impressive were Project Spark, which looks like it is an amalgamation of Little Big Planet and Minecraft in a way. So, fully realized 3D world, not blocky 3D like Minecraft, but actual 3D world. And you could go in with your Kinect or with your smart glass enabled tablet and kind of change the landscape and do all these different things. Also use voice commands to help out with that. And you could like build a world and build an adventure and then share it with your friends, and your friends could share theirs with you, and you could play it multiplayer and do all of these really cool things. It looks like a whole lot of fun, and it looks really, really good. And that is one of the few things that really excited me from their press conference was Project Spark. So if I get an Xbox One, that's probably what it's going to be for, is to play that, because that looks fantastic. The other title they showed was from Respawn Entertainment, and it's a game called Titanfall. Now, for those who don't know, Respawn Entertainment was created by the same guys who were the heads of Infinity Ward. They left Infinity Ward under some less than acceptable circumstances. They left Infinity Ward, they went and they founded Respawn Studios. One of those two people left, but they took a lot of the Infinity Ward employees with them. One of them left, so now we just have Vince Zampella and his crew at Respawn Entertainment. And they have made a game called Titanfall. And Titanfall looks like Call of Duty with wall running, jetpacks, and mechs. And if that doesn't get you a little bit excited, I don't know what will. Titanfall looks great. It is an Xbox exclusive, kind of. It's going to be on 360, it's going to be on Xbox One, and it's going to be on PC. So, no Sony version of the game, but you can play it on PC, you can play it on your Microsoft machines. Now, the only thing I worry about with that game is either the 360 version will be subpar because they won't be able to add all the features that the Xbox One version has and the PC version has, or the PC version and Xbox One versions will be hamstrung because they're having constrained themselves to the Xbox 360 version. So we'll see how that works out, but it looked really good, and it looked like a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen the trailer or gameplay videos, go find them. I'll link them in the description below. It was fantastic. And the last thing Microsoft did was they announced the price of the Xbox One, which is $499, 499 euros, or 429 pounds in the UK. Now, if you're in Europe or the UK, you're kind of getting screwed on the price, but don't worry, Sony's doing the same thing to you, so I don't know how you feel about that. But, so we have a $500 console. We've got a lot of pretty good looking exclusives. We've got a couple that look absolutely fantastic, like Project Spark. And we've got some more questionable ones, like Rise, Son of Rome, and the new Killer Instinct title. But what they did not address during their press conference was all of their stuff about DRM and about the online connectivity, always online, or the 24-hour check-in that they've talked about. They didn't talk about any of that at the press conference. They declined interviews afterwards. They canceled their roundtable afterwards. So what that tells me is one of two things. Well, not really one of two things, but just really kind of one thing. What they wanted to do was say, we put the information out on our website in between our two press events, because they had the one a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and they had the one at E3. They put out all that information on their website. They want you to go to the website, get the information from there, and they are basically done talking about it. They don't want to speak on the matter. And it could also be a thing of, after their previous press event, when people got to the interviews, there were mixed messages being given to the press. So that could be why, as they wanted to make sure that Instead of making sure everybody was on message and knew exactly what they needed to say, they decided just to not let anybody talk. Which is understandable after the fiasco from a few weeks ago. But we do know that the Xbox One has the 24-hour check-in. We do know that it has the DRM in place, but that is supposedly a publisher decision, not a Microsoft decision as to whether or not you can buy, sell, trade the used games, so on and so forth. So from there, we're going to go ahead and move on to the PlayStation conference. Now, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about what they showed for the PlayStation Vita or the PlayStation 4, but we'll give you just a very quick rundown. The Vita, they showed the new Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate game. They showed a handful of other indie games. They showed a Killzone Mercenary game. And they showed some ports from the PS3 and PS2 and so on. So Flower, the God of War HD collection, Final Fantasy X and X-2 HD remakes, as well as the Walking Dead game from Telltale. So those are all coming to Vita. Fairly interesting. They also showed a few things for the PS3. They showed Last of Us, which was strange because it came out this week. They showed Beyond Two Souls, which is the newest David Cage game. The gentleman behind Fahrenheit and or Indigo Prophecy, depending on what country you live in, as well as the gentleman behind Heavy Rain. So, looks really, graphically looks really good. It looks like it could be very interesting. We'll have to wait and see. They also showed off that they are going to have exclusive content for Batman Arkham Origins, which, from what I could see, it amounted to some skins for Batman. Take that for what you will. I'm still going to play it on 360 because that's what I have. And finally, we get down to the PS4 console reveal. So they finally showed off the console, and it actually looks a whole lot like the Xbox One, except smaller and slanted. So take that for what you will. It doesn't really matter. They're both two-tone black boxes that you put a disc in and you play games or you watch movies or whatever. They also went through some of their entertainment options. That's all throwaway information as far as I'm concerned. They showed off a few new games. They showed The Order 1866, which looks like a steampunk London with airships fighting werewolves. It looked pretty interesting. It looked really good, but what they showed was pre-rendered or CG, so we don't really have a point of reference on actual gameplay. But it is being made by the guys who made the God of War PSP titles, which were fairly highly rated titles, so it has the possibility of being a really, really good new IP. We'll see. They showed Killzone Shadowfall, which looks like Killzone, not something I've ever been hugely interested in. They showed Drive Club, which is another new racing game from the looks of things. Not really that interested in that either, to be honest. They showed Infamous Second Son. Now, that looked really good. I've never played the Infamous games, because I don't own a PS3, as I've already stated. But they always looked really, really interesting and really fun to me, and this one doesn't look all that much different. It looks graphically better, but it looks like it's going to be the same kind of stuff going on, so that's really cool. They also showed Knack, which was... I'm still not really sure what that game is. I'm not sure if it's an action game. I'm not sure if it's a platformer. I'm not sure exactly how it plays, but it looks kind of interesting, and at least it's something that's very brightly colored and kind of out there, so I'm interested to see what they do with that. Now, moving on, they showed a few other kind of surprise games a little bit. So, number one, they showed a new Mad Max game. Mad Max being the Mel Gibson movie from several years ago. And pre-rendered CG trailer, but it's Mad Max. If they can somehow do the movie justice, or just do that kind of world justice, then I'll be happy to play it. They showed that the Elder Scrolls Online is going to be on PS4. What nobody bothered to mention is it's also going to be on the Xbox One as well. I believe that has been confirmed from the last thing that I read. They also had several indie developers come up on stage. The first thing they showed was Transistor. Now, Transistor is from Supergiant Games, the guys who made Bastion. Bastion was fantastic. Transistor looks to be very similar while being different enough to still be interesting. And it's going to be a PS4 and Xbox One exclusive. Not Xbox One. PS4 and PC exclusive. Sorry about that. And that's rather interesting, being that Bastion was on the Xbox 360. They also showed several other indie games, and that they are allowing self-publishing, unlike Microsoft. And the games they showed off were Don't Starve, which I believe is already out on PC, or it may just be in beta, but I've seen videos of it all over the internet. Mercenary Kings, which is from the same team that made Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. They showed Octodad Dadliest Catch. They showed Raise the Dead, Outlast, Galax Z, Secret Ponchos, and Oddworld New and Tasty. Now, for the most part, while it is nice to see all these indie games finally getting onto consoles and getting some kind of big push on consoles, almost all of these, if not all of these, are either already out on PC or they are coming to PC. They're somewhere in the Steam Greenlight system, but you'll be able to play pretty much all of those on your PC. So, they are, however, exclusive to the PlayStation 4. They will not be on the Xbox. So, if you like indie games, but you don't want to play them on your PC, then this might not be a bad way to go, because it looks like they've got some pretty heavy-hitting games here. Now, finally, they also showed, they had Square Enix come in and show off 2 new titles. They showed Final Fantasy Versus 13, which has now become Final Fantasy 15. It looks like they're cutting the ties with the 13 franchise with this new game, and I couldn't tell if it was gameplay or if it was pre-rendered or what was going on there, but it's a new Final Fantasy game. If it actually has an open world, unlike 13 did, Final Hallway 13, as I like to call it, then it could be really good. Or it could be Square Enix trolling us and they're just going to make 13 again with a different character. God, I hope not. The other thing they showed, which was very, very exciting for a lot of people, was Kingdom Hearts 3. Now, I'm not a big Kingdom Hearts fan. I've played the games, I enjoy them. It's just not a franchise that I get, overly excited for, but I know that people for probably about a decade have been wanting Kingdom Hearts 3 to come out, and here it is. Square Enix is finally releasing it. Sony showed it at their press conference. And once again, it's not an exclusive, nor is Final Fantasy 15. Both of those games will be on the Xbox One as well. So, finally, Sony decided that they were going to go directly at Microsoft in the last part of their conference. They said they have no used games policies. They said that you don't have to have an online connection or online check-in, so on and so forth. What they did manage to sneak in there is that PlayStation Plus will now be required for multiplayer. They snuck it in there while they had everybody excited about the other things. They said PlayStation Plus will be required for multiplayer. Now, granted, PlayStation Plus is only $5 a month, and you still get the free games and all of the other stuff. So, and you get their new cloud service. So, really, it's still a good deal, but it's a little sneaky of them to sneak it in there. The other thing that they didn't mention, which Microsoft actually did mention, although not during their conference, is that Sony themselves do not have any used games policy. They'll allow you to trade your games, so on and so forth. What they didn't mention was that they are still allowing publishers to enforce their own version of DRM on their games on the Sony console. So, basically, the publishers can do the same thing on Sony's console that they can do on Microsoft's and block used game sales, block trading of games, so on and so forth. However, what that means for both companies is that now it's the publisher's problem, and that is nice because it gives the general masses a direct line at the guys who are causing you to not be able to trade in your games and so on and so forth. Now, finally, one of the last things they showed was Bungie's new game, Destiny. Bungie and Activision coming together, making a new game called Destiny. And it looks very Halo-esque, but it still looks really good. And it's this multiplayer, quote-unquote, shared world shooter. From what I understand, you can, team up with your friends, or you can have that wonderful thing of you're in an area, and somebody else happens to be playing in the same area, and they're, maybe kind of around your skill level or whatnot, and it may just plop them into your world because it's all the same shared world, essentially. Looks fun, looks like it could be really good. It looked very Halo-esque, which I'm okay with because I'm a big fan of Halo. Now, the other thing that they announced was the price of their console. So they are coming in at $399, 399 euros, or 349 pounds in the UK. This is basically the same problem we have with the Xbox One. The Europeans and the guys in the UK are kind of getting shafted on the price. They're having to pay more even beyond the normal tax that they would have to pay. But here's what it breaks down to. Sony came out. They showed off a lot of games, most of which aren't actually exclusive. They took a few shots at Microsoft, which was great PR for them, but once the facts start coming out that the publishers can still enforce DRM even on the Sony console, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. At that point, it just basically comes down to whether or not you're okay with the full online connectivity of the Xbox One versus not having to be connected on the PlayStation 4. That's kind of personal preference. The other thing it comes down to is the Sony's PlayStation 4 console is coming in $100 cheaper than the Xbox One, which is actually backwards of what I thought was going to happen. I expected the Xbox One to come in as being cheaper since it's not quite as powerful as the PlayStation 4. However, what I failed to take into account when I made that prediction was that the Xbox One has to have the Kinect. The PlayStation 4 just needs the box. So that is our quick, well, I say quick, that is our very long rundown of the events of the 4 major E3 press conferences. Now, you may be wondering, why didn't you cover Nintendo's press conference? 2 reasons. One, they didn't have a press conference. They had their Nintendo Direct conference where they basically pre-recorded it and just at a certain time they put it up and everybody could watch it. The other thing is they didn't really show a whole lot of new stuff that's interesting. Like a new Mario game, a new Smash Brothers game, and a new Donkey Kong game, and a new Legend of Zelda in that Link to the Past 2D top-down style. So that's why I decided not to cover that, but there's your basic coverage of the Nintendo conference. That's all really notable that came out of it. So with all of that said, I have been your host, Jeffrey Lazarus, and thank you for watching the weekly news update on the Gaming Vector.